So in a somewhat futile effort last week to fight off holiday fat, I was at the gym trying to both listen to Christmas music on my iPod and concurrently watch the TV so that I would be entertained enough to spend a reasonable amount of time on the elliptical machine. And sort of ironically, as I was listening to my Christmas music, I was also watching this closed-captioned interview with a bunch of song or music executives from big music companies who were discussing new Christmas songs. And by new Christmas songs, they didn't mean new versions of classic Christmas carols as sung by our favorite pop artists. They meant really new Christmas songs, things we have never heard of, and that come on our radio and we go, what is that? And these music executives said, you know, even though we make millions making new songs, we really don't like to make new Christmas music. And the reason, they said, was that Christmas is all about tradition. And this is a season when people aren't very much interested in things that aren't traditional. And as I watched that show and I listened to my collection of mostly classic Christmas music, I thought, yeah, they're probably right. That really is how many of us feel about Christmas and Christmas time. So often for us, this time of year is about tradition, and we love our traditions. It just wouldn't be right if you came to church tonight and we didn't have the Christmas tree, and we didn't have the candles, and we didn't sing the Christmas carols. It just wouldn't be Christmas for you. It just wouldn't be Christmas for me. But you know, there's a downside to tradition as well. Sometimes Christmas tradition, for many of us, can mean somehow being transported backwards to a different time. And we sort of think that Christmas is about going back to a time like we sing about in our traditional Christmas carols. Christmas is long, long ago, when we imagine ourselves in the Christmases of our childhood, somewhere deep in Grandma's house. Sometimes Christmas, the Christmas tradition, is somehow about being transported somehow to another place. It's about being home for the holidays, right? We want to be home, even if the place that we think of as home, at least in our minds, isn't there anymore, or isn't really home for us anymore. And sometimes Christmas tradition is about being transported back into some kind of alternate reality. You know the traditional Christmas I want? I want the traditional Christmas that I remember, which is not the same as the Christmas that actually happened, because I remember things differently. I know that I do. And this is why I find it so amusing. If you've watched Saturday Night Live in the last few weeks, you know Bobby Moynihan has this character called Drunk Uncle. Drunk Uncle shows up and starts, he says, you know, Drunk Uncle always shows up every time that there's a holiday and makes life difficult for all of us. And it's funny because I think back and I think, you know, I had Drunk Uncle at my Christmases. Maybe not the uncle, and maybe not just one, but they were there. I edit that out because Christmas is supposed to be about being transported back into a reality that's different than what I live in now. But you know, when I read the Christmas story even about the shepherds and the angels, I realize that for the shepherds, that first Christmas night was not about being transported to some other time or place or reality. Instead, Christmas was about suddenly and unexpectedly experiencing God's presence right in the present moment, right in the middle of their average, regular workday, which, if you were a shepherd, included the night shift. They were terrified. God was breaking in to their regular, everyday lives. And, why were they terrified? Well, because it was an angel, of course, but aren't you a little scared when you're in the middle of your regular workday and you got a lot of things to do and suddenly the phone rings and the email comes in and all of a sudden somebody says, stop, you got to do something else. It's scary. God acting right in the middle of the present moment. Those shepherds, they experienced God suddenly and unexpectedly right where they were. Right there. Not in a special holy place. It would have been easy for the angels to say, go to Jerusalem. That's the place where you expect to find God. But they said, go next door into Bethlehem. They're not very far apart. For fun, pull out Google Maps sometime and look for the walking directions between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. You will see that it takes 1 hour and 47 minutes, according to Google, to walk it. And that's only because today there are multiple security checkpoints going around there. But it actually is only a distance you will see about half what you traveled if you drove in from Poolesville tonight to get to here. It's really close. The angels could have said, go someplace else to experience God. But instead, they were told to experience God right where they were. Those shepherds experienced God suddenly and unexpectedly right there in the midst of their everyday lives, and they were told basically to go back to their fields, to go back to the places they lived each and every day, glorifying God and figuring out how to live out their experience of God in their regular, everyday lives. You know, sometimes in our desire to live out our Christmas traditions, we even turn this story, the story of the shepherds, into one of those alternate realities that we can somehow imagine ourselves in, complete with stars and angels and silent nights. But the real message of Christmas is that Jesus is always coming into our lives in the same way that he came into the lives of those shepherds. And that doesn't mean that we should be looking for angels or silent nights, but it does mean expecting God to act in the midst of our regular, everyday lives, right now. Not looking for some other time when somehow things are more holy for us. It means also looking for God to act suddenly and unexpectedly in our lives in the places that we live out our regular, everyday lives. Seeing God at work, at home, at school, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods. Not in some other place that we might never be. And it means looking for God to act suddenly and unexpectedly in ways that ask us to figure out how to live out our experience of God in the midst of our daily lives, instead of waiting until we find ourselves in some more quiet, peaceful reality. Because you know, I love the traditions of Christmas, and I know you do too. But perhaps the best tradition of Christmas is the story that reminds us that we do not need to be transported to another time or place or reality to experience God in our lives. In Jesus, God has come into our time as well. In Jesus, God is acting in our regular, everyday lives. And through Jesus, God is calling us to be people who live out the praise of God in our regular, ordinary lives. That is finally what the shepherds found out about God. And that's what Jesus wants us to know as well.